Have you ever wished you could become someone completely unshakable? Someone who doesn't break under pressure, who no longer gets destroyed by rejection, betrayal, criticism, silence. Someone who has stopped bleeding internally while pretending to smile on the outside. It's not that you want to be cold. You don't want to be numb. You just want peace, a sense of emotional immunity, to finally be free from this quiet suffering that never seems to end. Maybe you're tired of playing strong, tired of holding everything together for everyone else, tired of putting on the mask day after day while silently screaming inside. If that's you, keep listening, because this is not just another motivational speech. This is a confrontation, a journey inward, and maybe, finally, your way out. Let's begin with a truth most people are afraid to say out loud. As long as you keep trying to avoid pain, it will continue to control you. The more you shield yourself, the more vulnerable you become. The more you run from discomfort, the more it chases you. You already know this. You've lived it. You've tried numbing, distracting, staying busy, being agreeable. And yet the pain always finds a way back in. Through someone's words, through someone's absence, through a memory that won't let go. You're not weak for feeling it. You're just honest enough to admit what others won't. The truth is, most people are hurting, but some pretend better than others. Carl Jung, one of the most important voices in depth psychology, said this: "We are not what happens to us. We are what we choose to become, and that's the key." Becoming untouchable has nothing to do with becoming cold or indifferent. It's not about emotional armor. It's not about pretending nothing affects you. It's about integration. It's about going into the shadows and bringing light to what's been hidden for too long. Because real strength isn't the absence of pain. It's being fully aware of who you are even when you're bleeding. It's not about never being hurt again. It's about finally reaching the place where what hurt you can no longer control you. This message is for you. You who have been walking around with invisible wounds. You who feel like everyone else has emotional power over you, and you don't know why. You who are tired of constantly adjusting, pleasing, predicting, just to avoid another cut. But what if I told you that what's hurting you isn't actually the people around you? It's not their silence. It's not their betrayal. It's not even the harsh words or the things they failed to do. What's hurting you is what's already inside you. The wound that's still open. The trauma that was never dealt with. The story you keep repeating in your head. The false belief that says, if I were just better, this wouldn't happen. That is what's destroying you. And until you look at it, really look at it, you'll keep living at the mercy of other people's actions. Jung showed us something most people miss. The pain we feel when the outside world disappoints us is really just a reflection of the parts of us we haven't yet faced inside. That's why one person can go through heartbreak and find peace, while another goes through the same thing and falls apart. It's not about the event. It's about the echo. It's about where it lands and what it touches inside you. Here's an uncomfortable truth. You still suffer because, on some level, you still believe you can control how the world should treat you. You think if you're good enough, kind enough, smart enough, calm enough, then maybe, just maybe, no one will hurt you again. But control is an illusion, and as long as you chase it, you'll be tense, hyper-aware, predicting everything, avoiding everyone, living in fear. You don't need more control. You need more awareness. And that's where everything begins to change. Let's go deeper. You've been taught to believe that your pain is caused by what's happening out there, by people who leave, by the words they say, by the betrayals you never expected. But here's the brutal truth. None of it has real power over you, unless there's already something within you, wide open, unhealed, waiting to be triggered. What hurts is not what they do. What hurts is what you believe it means. This proves I'm not enough. This confirms I'll always be abandoned. This shows that I'm unlovable no matter what I do. Sound familiar? That's not the world hurting you. That's your unconscious repeating itself. Carl Jung said that what we do not bring to consciousness will continue to happen to us, and we'll call it fate. Let that sink in. All the pain, the patterns, the emotional reactions that feel uncontrollable, they aren't just random. They're echoes from your past. Messages from your unconscious. Parts of you that were ignored, suppressed, or never made sense of, now screaming for your attention. That's why a single comment can shatter you. Why silence from someone you love can feel like abandonment. Why being misunderstood feels like rejection. It's not because you're too sensitive. It's because that pain already existed long before today, and every painful moment just pressed on the bruise. Here's where most people get it wrong. They try to change their environment. They try to avoid conflict, avoid difficult people, avoid risk. They build routines and relationships designed for emotional safety, not truth. But no matter how carefully they try to live, the pain still finds its way back in. Because healing doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from understanding it. It comes from integration. You don't need to toughen up. You don't need to become colder. You need to become more aware, more conscious of what's operating in you beneath the surface. Because until then, you're a puppet of your own emotions. The triggers are in control. The patterns decide for you. The shadow, the parts of yourself you refuse to face, is the one calling the shots. And as long as you're unaware, the unconscious will run your life. And you will keep calling it just the way I am. But it's not who you are. It's who you became in order to survive. Now it's time to evolve. The things that hurt you now, they're not here to destroy you. They're here to wake you up. That breakup that shattered you, that silence that felt like abandonment, that moment when you were rejected or overlooked, they weren't about them. They were about what was already sleeping inside you. The fear of being left, the need to be perfect, the belief that love has to be earned. Jung didn't tell us to fight the unconscious. He told us to meet it, to make it conscious, to bring the dark into the light, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because the things you fight internally, they just grow stronger in the dark. You've tried so hard to move on, but the truth is, you didn't move on. You buried it. You called it strength. You called it maturity. You called it not letting it get to you. But inside, it still gets to you. It shows up as anxiety when things are going well, as self-sabotage right before you succeed, as numbness in relationships, or panic when they get too close. This is not bad luck. This is not you being broken. This is your unconscious trying to protect you, by keeping you away from anything that feels like the past. But you're not the person you were back then. You don't need to keep reliving the same emotional story. You're not powerless. You're just unaware. And when you begin to bring light to what lives in your shadows, your shame, your fears, your hidden grief, you take your power back. You stop reacting. You start observing. You no longer panic. You respond with clarity. This is what emotional freedom looks like. This is what being untouchable really means. Not because nothing ever hurts, but because nothing owns you anymore. Let's go deeper still. You were taught to hate pain, taught that it's something to escape, to avoid, to silence. That crying is weakness, that feeling too much makes you fragile, that suffering is something to be ashamed of. And so, you ran from it. You distracted yourself. You got busy. You stayed strong. You put on the mask. You built the walls. But the pain didn't go away, did it? It just changed shape. Now it shows up as anxiety, or apathy, or rage you don't understand. It leaks out in relationships, in avoidance, in the way you sabotage yourself right when everything starts to feel safe. Ignored pain doesn't disappear. It just digs itself deeper until one day it erupts and everything falls apart. Carl Jung saw suffering differently. To him, pain wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a flaw in your character. It wasn't something to eliminate. It was something to listen to. He once said, "Depression is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, and listen to what she has to say." But no one ever taught you how to do that. No one ever said, "Sit with your pain, let it speak." Instead, you were taught to run, to silence it, to keep smiling, to stay productive, to be fine. And now here you are, exhausted. Not because you feel too much, but because you've been running from yourself for too long. Here's the real conflict. There's a part of you that wants to grow, that wants to evolve, that wants to be free. And there's another part, your ego, that wants to stay safe, that wants control, familiarity, comfort. It's that tug of war between the part of you that's ready to change and the part of you terrified to let go. That's where the pain lives, because change means loss, letting go of toxic people, leaving behind false identities, allowing pieces of your old self to die. And yes, death hurts, even when it's symbolic. But in every symbolic death, there's also a rebirth. Because when everything falls apart, when the mask slips, when your carefully curated identity collapses, you're left with what's real. Not the image, not the performance, not the strong persona you created to survive, but you, raw, unfiltered, honest. And for the first time you can finally ask, who am I? Without the fear, without the mask, without the wound? This is where suffering becomes sacred, because it brings you face to face with the only thing that can truly heal you, yourself. Jung knew this. He understood that pain is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of something ancient and powerful. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you really are beneath all the conditioning. Not the person society told you to be. Not the child who had to behave a certain way to be loved. Not the adult who performs just enough to feel safe. But the whole self, the integrated self. The version of you that knows the darkness and the light, and hides from neither. But here's the hard truth. Most people never complete that journey. They start, but they stop when it gets hard. They numb, they escape. They go back to the surface. Because individuation isn't about comfort. It doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't give you guarantees. It strips you bare. It shows you what you've been avoiding. It makes you let go of everything that no longer fits. And that hurts more than anything anyone else could ever do to you. Because you start to realize you are not your trauma. You are not your past. You are not your achievements, your performance, or your reputation. You are not what you built to survive. You are something deeper, something that's been trying to break through beneath it all. You become untouchable not because you've armored up, but because you've burned down everything false and risen from the wreckage, whole. You faced your shame. You confronted your neediness. You looked your insecurities in the eye and said, "I see you, and you no longer control me." That is clarity. That is freedom. That is power. This is where everything shifts. You've been told that strength is about resistance, that it's about walls, boundaries, armor. But Carl Jung showed us something different. Real protection doesn't come from hardening. It comes from clarity. The moment you understand what lives inside you, your patterns, your triggers, your wounds, the world outside of you, loses its grip. You're no longer reacting blindly. You're responding with awareness. You still feel pain, but it doesn't unravel you. You still face disappointment, but it doesn't define you. You still hear the criticism, but it no longer echoes inside the way it used to. Because now you know what belongs to you and what doesn't. That's what real emotional freedom looks like. Not pretending you don't care, not bottling everything up, not isolating yourself to avoid the mess, but being able to walk through chaos and remain grounded. Being able to sit with discomfort without needing to escape. being able to face rejection without making it about your worth. You stop fearing life because you've stopped fearing yourself. And when you do that, something incredible happens. You stop being breakable. Not because you've built stronger walls, but because you've stopped hiding what lies behind them. You've met the shadow. You've held your inner child. You've confronted the parts of you that used to sabotage everything. And you didn't run. You sat with them. You listened. You brought them home. Now, you are whole. And wholeness cannot be manipulated. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be destroyed by someone's opinion or approval or silence. But be warned, this kind of freedom changes your world. Because when you stop living on the surface, you will start to drift from those who are still hiding there. You'll no longer laugh at what isn't funny. You'll no longer stay in places that demand your silence. You'll no longer chase validation like it's oxygen. And yes, that kind of depth can feel lonely. Not because you're alone, but because very few people are willing to meet themselves like this. Very few people are ready to drop the performance. Very few people want the truth more than they want comfort. But you made it this far. You chose the truth, and that choice alone makes you untouchable. Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." This is the key. You spent years resisting the fear of abandonment, resisting the wound of not being enough, resisting the truth of who you are when no one's looking. But now you accept. You accept that you have been hurt. You accept that there are wounds. You accept that you've made mistakes. You accept that you're still healing. And because of that, you are no longer fighting yourself. You are no longer stuck in the loop of reactivity. You are no longer begging the outside world to stop hurting you. Because you've gone inside and reclaimed the power to respond instead of react. That's what shields you now. Not a mask, not a perfect life, not control, but awareness. And awareness is untouchable. When you live with that kind of consciousness, nothing can sneak in and ruin you, because you've seen it all before within yourself. You don't need to panic anymore. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You don't need to run anymore. You're not asleep. You're awake. And that changes everything. Now that you've made it here, say this out loud, or whisper it to yourself. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt me again, because I will never again abandon myself. That is the promise. That is the path. That is the transformation. Not into someone perfect, not into someone invincible, but into someone whole, someone who no longer reacts, but responds, who no longer breaks, but bends, who no longer begs, but chooses. If this message resonated with you, if something deep inside you has shifted, type this in the comments. I choose awareness. Let the world know you're not pretending anymore. You're not performing anymore. You're not hiding anymore. You're here. You're healing, and you are finally free.